Hello and welcome to Spectrum Projection, a media review podcast where we analyse characters who may fit into the autism spectrum. I'm Hannah, an actually autistic person with a master's in literature, focusing on the analysis of disability in fiction and in memoir.
And I'm Tilda. And this is your first verbal warning.
Trigger warnings in the description. Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Well, you know, I've got an slightly alcoholic drink because it's me in my hands today.
Tilda's leading this one. You can probably tell from the subject matter, it wasn't a film I felt comfortable watching.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this because basically this movie came out recently and people were talking about it. And I said to Hannah, so either we watch this movie now and talk about it, or we never bother, because there is no reason to talk about this movie. Because there is reason to talk about this movie, but for us to talk about this movie like months or years down the line, it's not going to give us anything except just suffering.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you can only draw attention to it when, like, you can't promote it any more than it's already promoted in the public consciousness. Like, people are already aware of this movie right now. Anybody who cares about the topic of this podcast has already heard about Sia's film music.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. So, like, there's nothing we can really do to be promoting it, whereas if we dig this all up again in a year from now, I feel like that's just going to be recirculating the bullshit that this film has in it. In case you couldn't tell, we're not positive. You should go back and listen to our episode about the Star Trek character Dr. Bashir.
The first half of that, I think.
Yeah, we talked quite extensively about the problems that would come out about Sia's movie music at that time, because the movie hadn't actually been released yet.
Because at that point, it was just her showing her ass on Twitter.
Yeah. Just having a full public meltdown.
Which I don't... it's too broad. There's too much to talk about for me that I don't want to talk about Sia's Twitter or Sia at all, other than, like... when it comes up.
Like, as an author, we will talk about Sia as, like, somebody who had an artistic vision and an not autistic. That's the whole problem. Who had a whole artistic vision and what their intention was and what their, like, choices in filmmaking say about them. But I don't want to talk about them as a person because I think we've already said pretty extensively, she mishandled this from a PR perspective and she mishandled this from an actual filmmaking perspective. There's a lot of other behind-the-scenes stuff about, like, hiring autistic actors and, like, consultations with autistic actual advocacy groups as opposed to, like, autistic hate groups, essentially. Like, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, but safe to say, this film did not start out on the best possible footing to do what I think she wants to do, which is create some kind of positivity surrounding autism.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was, I have a problem with being morbidly curious, and I decided to check this movie out. At that point, we had already agreed that we weren't going to talk about it, because Hannah basically said, I don't want to watch it, I don't think I'll be able to handle it.
Hey, hot tip to listeners, if there is something that you just know watching it will make you feel bad, don't watch it. That is literally a form of emotional self-harm, and that sounds dramatic, but do not do it if you know
it's a kind of emotional self-harm I kind of struggle with. Like, I'm really bad for the doom scrolling stuff.
Like, but anyway, the comment section thing. Like, I say this because we talk about a lot of different media in this, which would be upsetting to people. If we ever say this is upsetting in a way that would upset you, try and resist the curiosity if you can. It's why Tilda was okay watching this, because she doesn't have as many personal, deeply ingrained issues with the things that come up in this movie.
And even because I want to talk about this, what happened. So I started watching this movie. I managed to find a way to watch it that did not give any money to Sia. Let's leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started watching it, and I was sort of expecting to either be, like, too tired or too bored to watch the whole thing. And that kind of is what happened. So I watched the sort of first 20 minutes, and then I was like, I don't want to watch this anymore.
I distinctly remember you pausing and going, like, you won't believe this shit. Like, unfortunately, I definitely do believe this shit.
Yeah, there were a couple of... Because Anna was sitting in the same room, and me watching it on my laptop, and a couple of times I paused it, and I was like, do you want me to tell you? Or do you not want to hear anything?
You were pretty good at going over, like, the general, like, hey, is this as fucked up as I think it is?
Yeah.
And me being like, oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I watched the first 20 minutes, left it for a couple of hours, and then I watched another 20 minutes or so, and finally I finished watching it, and I was like, okay, I've seen it now, And I did take some notes, and I was ready to leave it behind myself and to not think about it anymore. But don't you know it, the motherfucker got stuck in my head, and I was thinking about it, and, turning scenes and stuffs and my perspective over in my head, watching a couple of YouTube essays, because I love those, and it didn't leave me. And I was talking about it to Hannah, and at some point she said, do you just want to make an episode about it?
Mm-hmm. And so I will make it clear, I'm probably not in a perspective where I can judge this movie because I have not watched it. But Tilda has. Tilda is in a position where you cannot bring up the argument if you haven't watched it, so therefore you can't criticise. I think I can criticise this film on some very basic core principles. And if you want to know what those issues are, we'll probably put some in the description some of the YouTube video essays you watched. I watched the one by that Star Trek reviewer that you showed me.
Yeah.
Her one was really good.
Yeah. But can recommend that one. And a lot of her videos. She's a fellow Star Trek fan, so...
Look, they did a video about autism in Star Trek, so of course I love them. Shout out.
I gotta see her video about that.
We will get there. Eventually we'll do something that we want to do, which means we'll talk about the Star Trek characters that we clearly want to talk about every single damn week.
Anyway. I'm just gonna dive into it. I'm just gonna start going. I have my little list here of points, and I'm not gonna go through the entire movie beat by beat, because there were sections that I just deeply do not care about, because they're not relevant to anything. Okay, the movie starts with a kind of weird shot of Music, who is not our main character, I would say. The main character is actually, her sister and caretaker. But the titular character, Music, in her underwear, it's not shot sexually, but it feels weird that that's the first shot of the movie. We don't see her face. We just the camera just sort of moves over her body as she's humming and, stimming, or doing what this movie thinks stimming looks like, which is what it might look like for some people, but it feels very exaggerated and cartoonish. And that is something that I've seen come up in these essays I've watched by autistic people, because basically I haven't really been interested in anyone else's perspective except autistic people, because that's the one I don't have. People who just criticize it as allistic people, I feel like that's something that I can do on my own, so I don't really
they can raise interesting points, but I think it is always important, whatever the criticism is, to try and contact whoever is affected by it.
Yeah, for me personally, it's just the autistic perspective is just more interesting, so that's what I seek out to watch.
I will say, because I think it's relevant to that criticism, that it's come out that the actress, who was only like 14 at the time, was really upset about the idea of being offensive, like genuinely didn't want to do the role because she thought it would,
or she was unsure
people.
about it. It's it's a bit unclear, because all of this is from I think one interview with Sia, where she basically said that Maddie Ziegler, is that her name, was upset and crying and saying, I don't want people to think I'm making fun of them, and Sia said, don't worry, I will protect you, as in protect her from criticism. It wasn't don't worry, we're not making fun of people, it was don't worry, I will protect you from criticism, which is an interesting take. But again, this is just from one interview, so maybe Sia just worded it poorly or whatever. I gotta say, she was right to worry, because especially in the first 5 minutes, I feel like it's kind of a trial of fire. I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's very sensory overwhelming, could trigger epilepsy, it's very loud, very bright, a lot of things going on. It almost feels like it's trying to scare everyone away who
this might actually relate to in any personal way.
Like, it's like just making sure that no one who actually knows that this is bullshit can watch past the first 5 minutes.
So how come there's so much sensory stuff? I thought it was a realism thing.
So this is not a musical. It's basically that kind of artsy movie that musicians make, where it's a normal movie that just has random music videos interspersed. So we have like a couple of seconds of a shot of Music in her kind of weird one-piece underwear thing. Then it cuts into a music video that we are meant to understand is basically Music's internal life. So it's her dressed up in a yellow one-piece that is covered in like these sort of foam lightning rods, and she's wearing headphones that are made out of braids. And also, this is another criticism, that her face is browned up. She appears to be wearing some kind of skin darkening makeup, because apparently her character is supposed to be mixed race. When the actor is not mixed race, but apparently the character is supposed to be. I did not catch that in the movie.
I think that's worse, because isn't the whole plot that her half-sister or whatever is a drug dealer? Wouldn't that also be saying that racial element with drug dealing?
Oh, well, yeah, but maybe her sister is full white, so maybe that's fine. Who knows?
Christ.
But anyway, we haven't gotten to that yet. So this music video is interesting. And this one is, it's another thing that might be and it was difficult for me to watch. And I think I can't imagine how difficult it must be to watch for someone who might feel personally attacked by this. The weird twitching and blinking and facial jerks that she is performing throughout this. She's doing these sort of weird, clownish facial expressions, and I'm trying to find a way to describe it verbally.
It's like the thing of articulating your fingers a lot.
Yeah, like when you're trying to do ooh, I'm a creepy little claw hand.
And the whole hyperextension of muscles in your jaw, when you open your jaw really wide, like you're yawning. And stuff like that. I know exactly the things you're talking about because I don't even have to have seen the movie, and I know exactly what actions they've done, because it's the ones where it's stay away from that person on the bus because they're scary, and all they're doing is, having facial bodily tics.
And what I wanted to say is, Maddie Ziegler was right to worry about looking like she's making fun of people, because her performance is basically just... It took me back to middle school, because it was middle school bullies. She literally just looks exactly like a shitty middle school girl making fun of the weird kid in class.
Oh, and
it was revolting.
It makes me think of that Donald Trump thing with when he was making fun of that disabled reporter, and he was pretending to have a spatial tic, so he had the whole tensed up arms and just flailing his fingers,
jerking arms. Yeah,
it's so stereotypical.
And we also have background dancers in the background also doing weird, basic creepy twitching.
I need to make this point. I am not saying that seeing these actual actions on film is the problem. It's when they're being pantomimed and exaggerated and put in a context where it's isn't this different? Isn't this weird? Even if you're saying it's beautiful, you're still highlighting its otherness.
And it's also definitely all performed by people who aren't autistic.
Yeah.
And
choreographed based on cartoonish versions of people who are autistic.
Clearly, it doesn't feel like it's based on any one person, but it's based on you've read a Wikipedia article about what stims look like. And there's something about it. Maybe this is you can just blame this on actors being bad, and maybe a really talented actor would be able to do this correctly. But it doesn't feel natural. The way it's performed, again, it feels like a bully doing it, because it looks like the person who's doing it doesn't actually do that naturally, which makes it look like, middle school, high school bully. The song lyrics I wrote down a couple of lines that were interesting. So the song itself, I like Chandelier. I kind of like Chandelier, but all the rest of CS music doesn't really interest me. But anyway, the lyrics are something like, I have a human life. It's like a choir of children, kind of. Just, I have a human life. It's a human being, woo. And there's a bit where they go, oh body, oh body, oh body, so on. Don't fail me now. And in my dreams, my body does not control me. My imagination sets my spirit free. This reality is too much for me. Basically...
I wish I had a webcam, because my face now is just kind of a lot.
Expression. So, from my personal interpretation of this, also based on other people's interpretation, is that these music videos are supposed to represent music's inner life. Mm-hmm. On the outside, she can't communicate with other people. She's just, humming and twitching and can't make eye contact. But inside, she's like a beautiful little girl who's smiling and dancing and wearing crazy outfits in colorful rooms. So in her imagination, she's not restrained by her clumsy autistic body.
Okay. So there's 8 different stereotypes here that I want to try and go through quick fire, because I'm sure they will all come up again. One, it's just the infantilizing thing of Maddie's character is a teenager.
Yeah.
She's being treated like she's 6, 7, maybe 8.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever. Having a younger mental age is a thing that happens. I'm fine with that being part of it if it's intentional. The idea of having an internal life is one that people have talked about in autistic fiction. Even the most successful, influential autistic text I think that exists at this time, which is the Temple Grandin series of biographies, talks about the idea of being an anthropologist on Mars, being somebody who is from a completely different culture and a completely different life, who can't interact with anyone else. This does not mean you have psychotic breaks with reality and you see everything in bright colours and you have complete hallucinations.
Which I to be fair, playing the devil's advocate, advocacy, whatever.
Advocate.
I don't think that is what Sia is trying to imply. But what I think she's doing, and this was a bad idea, because her idea of music's inner life is basically steeped in metaphor. It doesn't feel like we're getting any deeper understanding of what music is like than we do from the outside. It feels like it's sort of hiding behind metaphor to obscure the fact that Sia doesn't actually understand what autistic people are like inside their own head.
Like, the other thing that's getting to me is, like, this focus on bodily stuff.
Yeah.
On, like, my autistic body. When autism is a thing of the mind.
Yeah.
Like, most people with autism, obviously it's not 100%. Obviously there's lots of conditions that become more prevalent with autism. So stuff like dyspraxia or even, like, scoliosis. Things that involve, like, the actual change of your body in a way that inhibits your mobility does happen. But, like, people who are autistic aren't being like, free me from this terrible prison, because it's just, that's who they are.
Yeah.
Like, if you put my brain in a robot, that robot's gonna be autistic.
If you put my brain in a robot, I would be cool with that.
Yeah. The idea is, like, free me from my autistic body. It's like, motherfucker, the autism's coming with me. I don't get a choice in that, and I'm fine with that, because I would be a different person. Like, this complete inability to understand the fact that people, even people who have autism that, you know, really affects their quality of life, don't necessarily want to be exactly like everyone else, especially characters like Maddie, who are apparently very separated from the reality of their life. She doesn't have a concept of what everyone else is like. If she's that naive,
or does she? It's a problem with the movie that it's not super clear.
Oh, it's just continue.
So we cut away from the music video, and we are shown Music's morning routine, which is getting out of bed, going to the kitchen, saying, "Make you eggs." I missed this the first time I watched it because I had to rewatch it to remember that she isn't mostly nonverbal, but she does speak in these, like, clumsy, grammatically wrong sentences that I had to ask you about this because I wasn't too sure if this is, like, accurate to any experience of nonverbal experience.
I mean, it can be, but it's very unlikely. Like, usually nonverbal issues stem from, like, wanting an efficiency of communication. It's very unlikely they would say, "Make you eggs,"
when what they mean is, "Hello, grandma, will you make me eggs?"
Or breakfast, or give me eggs. They would just say a single word, probably something pretty easy to say, and, like, there would be issues with pronunciation, probably, if they really are out of practice, or it would just be a thing of, like, the same practice sentence, and if it's the same practice sentence, there's no reason it wouldn't be a sentence that would be
It feels like they're trying to imply that she's like a parrot, where she's literally just repeating the exact words that someone else said, even though she doesn't understand what they mean.
That is a separate thing that happens with autism called echolocalia. And it's just a thing where you repeat phrases. It comes up in a lot of, like, annoyingly, in a lot of sitcoms, like the youngest child in that family will repeat stuff under his breath after people say it. But that's, like, repeating things as you hear it. It's not I have a database of things that I'm going to repeat in appropriate situations. You're just echoing things.
Yeah.
So it's like a familiar thing that they've just kind of, like, misunderstood and put in a way where it's, like, trying to engender sympathy, because it's like, she just doesn't get it. But she's a person, because she's still asking for eggs.
Yeah. And so, routine, grandma makes her fried eggs with the line of ketchup, and it forms a smile, and that's the poster of the movie, or one of the posters of the movie. And she's braiding Music's hair while telling her fun facts about, like, did you know that cats don't meow at each other, they only meow at humans, and so on and so forth. And then Music goes out of the house and goes on her daily walk to the library. And we see, it's this scene of her, you know, walking through town with her little Walkman thing and her headphones. She wears her headphones all the time, which is, you know, a character trait because she's Music and she has music to cope with the world.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
It's the whole thing of, it is a very common thing that people who have sensory issues will wear headphones all the time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
so, like, it's a completely normal thing. Like, I had to wear headphones.
But again, it feels cartoonish because she's literally, their headphones are massive and she's walking around with this massive old Walkman just in her hand, like waving it in the air. It feels like it feels so, like, weird and exaggerated and, like, trying to draw as much attention to these differences as possible. I don't know, that's, again, I don't have this experience or this perspective, so I don't know. But it feels like someone who has motor issues wouldn't be walking around with a heavy implement in their hand all the time when they could just put that in their pocket.
I mean, if you have issues with limited mobility or tics that might make you drop things, you can carry stuff around, but I think a lot of the time it's a thing of you would assume there's a level of like, I would always put this in my pocket. Like my brother James always holds his tiny iPod in his hand because he's always worried about dropping it.
Yeah.
But like, if it's like a big heavy Walkman, they wouldn't be waving it around randomly if they could help it. They might, but also the thing of like, it seems very random for a thing that's supposed to be intensely routine based.
Yeah.
Like, it's a thing of like, I do this thing slightly differently every day because I always bring my Walkman with it and I like wave it around and I do this and I go here and it's like, if it's a really ingrained routine, small changes like that would really be difficult.
Yeah. And so she's walking through town and we see this sort of montage of people in her neighborhood helping her, you know, kind of secretly because she's not supposed to know that people are helping her out. And she stops by this newspaper stand and the guy is like, oh, hello, music. I got some pictures of dogs for you today. 10 today, or whatever. Because her special interest is supposed to be dogs. And this is something I didn't realize on my first watch through, but someone in an essay pointed it out, that they kind of present this perspective on how everyone in music's life loves her and cares for her and understands her perfectly and, you know, is so ready and willing to help her, when that's so far from the reality of a lot of, you know, neurodivergent people, especially people who are sort of visibly different. If you're walking down the road and you have tics and you're making weird noises and stuff like that, most people are going to just give you dirty looks and try to stay away. You're not going to have this sort of like friendly, loving community of people opening doors for you and people, you know, oh, how is your grandma? Even though you're not responding back. And here's some pictures of dogs because I love you so much, child.
Where is this based? Like, what's the setting?
I forget. It's some sunny American town. I think it might be Los Angeles.
Is it a city?
It's a city.
There's no fucking way would this happen. I'm sorry. Like, if you live in any kind of city, especially a metropolitan one where people change every single day, there's different people in town all the time because it's a tourist setting. Like, we don't even live in a city, but I would say where we live is fairly touristy. There is a 1 in a million chance I will see the exact same people every single day.
I guess it's supposed to be people who live in the neighborhood and people who work, like the guy who sells newspaper and the woman who sells watermelon on sticks. Okay. Is that a thing in America?
I guess it is.
Like an ice cream, but it's just a slice of watermelon.
The thing that gets me is like, yeah, okay, like maybe this is trying to make a point about like how communities come together and support autistic people. But the fact is, like, if you're trying to make this like edgy, this is how hard life is for this child, why would you introduce all this and then have none of them step forward when the worst happens because they already know where this is going?
I don't think that I think it's supposed to be uplifting because this feels very much like an inspiration porn movie. It's supposed to be this sort of music is so sweet and wonderful. Like, even though she has all these weirdness, her inner beauty shines through and people just help her.
The fucking Tiny Tim
Little
syndrome.
Bit that, yeah.
Like the thing of like, they are too pure for this sinful world, but they make our lives better by showing us how if we let go of our earthly concerns, it's like, fuck her, she just wants to go to the library.
Yeah.
Like, she's not here to inspire you. She's not here to make you sit there and be able to pat yourself on the back to be like, I helped today. It's like,
no, but you're wrong though. That's why she is here, Hannah. But anyway, she goes to the library and looks up a book about dogs because dogs is her special interest. And and there's this bit where she comes out of the library and she's still doing the face twitching thing. And then she looks up at the sky and sunlight shines down on her face and she's watching birds take off from a building nearby. And her face goes all serene and beautiful because, you see, in her inside mind, she is not this weird twitching child. She's actually a beautiful, serene person or whatever.
She's at peace with the world. It's like, she's at her own form of peace. It's like, fuck it, who cares? Like, I'm sorry, like, you should just assume that everyone is, like, doing what they should be doing.
This is the thing. This is going to be a little bit of a side tangent. I'm only at point 3 of my many points, so we're going to be here a while.
Yeah.
But a while back, I watched the stage show of The Hunchback in Notre Dame, legally, definitely. And there's a bit at the end where, Quasimodo has died tragically, and they sing a song about, like, how maybe one day the world will be better and kinder and stuff. And they sort of show a lot of these, like, background dancers are suddenly, like, putting on the deformities.
Like the ensemble is just doing
and it's, like, kind of... and it's kind of supposed to, be about, like, how we shouldn't judge people from their appearance and from how they look. But it's either supposed to show that, maybe these people are ugly on the inside, or maybe if they also were ugly, they would understand, or maybe Quasimodo is actually pretty on the... Like, this sort of idea of, like, it's a problem when you use physical deformity or stimming or,
just physical otherness
as a metaphor for badness or otherness, and then use normalcy, quote unquote, as a metaphor for being your true self, or for being beautiful, or for being, like, the how the inside of you is beautiful. Like, it's really muddles that metaphor. Like, this person is beautiful on the inside, by which I mean inside their ugly, deformed self is actually a normal, physically pretty person.
I also really fucking hate...
It doesn't fucking work as a metaphor for anything.
I also really fucking hate the whole, we shouldn't judge people from the outside. It's like, it shouldn't take, like, you experiencing being around someone who is physically different to learn that message. Like, I'm sorry, I find the whole, we should treat everyone the same thing fucking dumb, because I think everyone knows that. And I think it's any movie that's, like, trying to make a point out of, like, but they just because they look different doesn't mean they're not like you. It's like, of course they're just like you, but you spent this whole movie pointing out how nobody likes them and nobody connects to them, and, like, how they're definitely different from everyone else. And it's like, people with autism, people with tics, people with any kind of, like, bodily deformity even, are people. First and foremost, these films always fucking start off by trying to, like, spend as much time as possible showing how weird and different they are, and trying to, like, shock the audience into being like, oh my god, but they were a person the whole time. It's like, you should know that already. Like,
that's going to be the big reveal at the end.
Like, I don't want the soft, like, soft serving, very, like, self-congratulatory thing of, like, but actually they're nice. It's like, if you're doing this message, I think it kind of has to be disturbing. Just be like, hey, it's fucked up you're treating people like this.
Yeah.
It's not like by the way, they're people. It's like you're fucked up for thinking they're not people in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, going the other way just makes people feel like they can pat themselves on the back for learning that people are people.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're cutting back to the grandma in the flat, and she has a heart attack and dies. And music comes back, she sits down at the table, part of her routine, she sees the grandma's body on the floor and starts having a meltdown. And then one of the neighbors comes in, and he tries to comfort music and telling her, oh no, it's okay, she's just sleeping. And they take the body away, and there's, like, a scene where in fantasy mode, a spotlight shines up on the neighbor who is giving the grandma a salute for some reason, which I don't understand. But this is a very clever visual metaphor for the fact that this character is going to be important later. So the grandma dies, and you'd think, okay, so this is going to come up later, right? Like, music just lost her guardian, which is really traumatic. The grandma doesn't really, like, music, or the grandma comes up, and music's feelings and, her inner world doesn't really address any part of her grief or the trauma or nothing. I kept waiting for that to happen in the movie, and it never does. So I'll just, put you out of your suspense.
That's so shitty. Like,
yeah.
Especially if the grandma is so essential to the routine, because, like, even if she is genuinely incapable of understanding the fact that the grandma has died, which I would say is made worse by the fact that somebody told her this grandma is sleeping and no one's explained it beyond that point.
There's no scene of anyone explaining anything to her. And especially when this movie has scenes where they're trying to say that, oh no, yeah, music understands things, she just understands them differently. And they have scenes of music videos about music's inner life. Again, we portray her inner life, supposedly, but we don't actually get to hear any of her feelings on her grandma.
Like, she doesn't get to experience grief, which is genuinely a topic that people could tell a very interesting story about. It's like,
yeah, isn't that an interesting story? If you can't physically or verbally express your grief in the outside world, but you have it on the inside, I feel like that's an interesting perspective. But nah, fuck that. Anyway, we cut to her older sister, whose name is Kazoo, Musei and Kazoo, because their parents are hippies, probably. Again, we don't really get a lot of their backstory, but just that their mom was a drug addict. who is at some sort of social service meeting, and she's sleeping through it, and she's got her phones on the floor charging up because she doesn't give a shit, because her life is falling apart and she doesn't care. And she's got a shaved head because she's cool. And she's acting cool and above it because she doesn't care about anyone but herself, and it's the start of her character journey.
This is how we're going to start her character arc. Like, that seems so blatant.
Yeah.
There's no subtlety to that at all, because, like, I also hate the idea, and I don't know if it gets worse in this movie or not, the idea of, like, everyone who's not equipped to cope with helping care for somebody who is severely disabled is inherently an evil person who doesn't care about them. It's like, it's so hard to be a full-time carer. And if you don't know what to do and it's suddenly a task that's given to you, it is completely normal to feel out of your depth.
Yeah.
But to make it out like it's because she is the worst person on the planet who cares about no one.
Because I don't feel like that's the message. I feel like it's more that, I guess that the idea is that, if she was a normal person who's like more put together, she would be able to handle this easily. It's not that she's a bad person, it's that she needs music in her life to make her grow.
I think that's my whole point that I'm having an issue with it then, is just the whole thing of like, literally anyone can find it hard.
Yeah.
And like literally, even if they are the kindest, most saintly person in the world, it's a really hard situation to be in. And it's not suddenly going to become inspiring and easy just because you're a nice person who doesn't deal drugs.
And also, let's just put a message out there. The main character has entered the building because obviously the movie music is not actually about music. It's about Kazoo, her sister. So she gets the phone call telling her that the grandma's dead. And she turns up at the apartment, acting really nonchalant and blasé about the whole thing because, again, I kept thinking that we're going to see some backstory to this. Why doesn't Kazoo give a shit about her grandma dying? Or does she actually secretly give a shit? Never addressed, never brought up, never nothing. She has a weird interaction with the neighbor, which is like, Bob, or whatever the fuck your name was. Remember me? And he's like, yeah, you broke into my apartment and tried to steal my TV that one time. And she was like, ooh, yeah, I bant. Anyway, where's the money? So
I feel like this is just propping up my point of cartoonishly bad.
Yeah.
Which, again, undermines the storyline of, like, being changed by music, because, whatever. I've already made my point.
So she reads the will that the grandma prepared, and because the grandma knows Kazoo well, the first sentence of the will is, there's no money. Mm-hmm. Because she knows that, apparently she knows her granddaughter well enough to know that that's all she cares about, but still thinks that she is, like, a good person to care for music. And she says, there's no money, but there is a magical little girl named Music. Magical little girl. Literally, like, word for word. So yeah, Kazoo tries to... Again with Music supposedly having an inner life, but not really. At this point, she's on the floor watching a weird... I don't know if this is supposed to be a joke or a commentary or anything, but she's watching a weird kids show of this, like, really awkward presenter talking in a monotone voice and, like, right, kids, it's time to spin the wheel. And I don't know if that's supposed to be a metaphor or anything, but Music is very clearly into this program. She's laughing and smiling and apparently completely recovered from finding her grandma's corpse in the morning.
I mean, just to share, like, some personal stuff with, like, how I and my brother dealt with, like, finding out about, death in our family or whatever. Yeah. This is, like, a personal story. It doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but, like, it's fairly common for repression to be, like, the first response, even in people who aren't autistic. But for both me and my brother, my first response to finding out my granddad had died was like, well, I need to get James breakfast. I need to do this. I need to do that. And, like, just trying to get back into a routine because that's reassuring. Yeah. You just keep going.
Absolutely. But the problem is that there's no indication that she's repressing anything. As far as we understand, she legitimately thinks, grandma's asleep and she went on a holiday. We're never given any indication that she wonders about things, that she is aware of things.
She never even asks where grandma's gone.
Yeah, I don't think so. I not that I remember. Kazoo is trying to talk to Music while she's watching her show, like getting in the way of the TV and like, hey, I'm your sister, remember me? And Music just isn't giving her anything, and she very quickly gives up. She immediately starts making phone calls about trying to get rid of Music, like calling up some sort of social service and being like, do you do pickups? And they're like, no.
No, because that's a human being, you sick fuck.
And then Music goes bedtime and she said time to sleep or something like that. Again, with the weird broken sentences. And she goes to bed, and we have our second music video, which is initiated by okay, I'm gonna have to bring this up because I didn't take notes on this initially because I didn't realize that it was important, and I don't know that it necessarily was important, but there's another kid who I think is supposed to be Music's age, living across the road. He is shining a flashlight through Music's bedroom and, lighting up the wall, and it's okay, Music finds it amusing. And she has pictures of dogs all over the walls. And this leads into another music video of Music dancing through these, pictures of dogs wearing an outfit that looks like a loofah, and with a person who is dressed up to look like one of those, shaggy dogs of the kind.
Yeah.
Sheepdog? No.
English sheepdogs are the ones that are really big and fluffy.
But they have the
dreads.
Dreads, yeah. But I thought that this music video was literally just about, her inner life, she likes dogs. But I think, from watching someone else's essay about it, I think this is supposed to be like a romantic thing, because the song is kind of a romantic song about, wanting to be touched or whatever. And so this dog she's dancing with in the music video is supposed to represent the boy across the street who apparently has a crush on her, because he looks at her when she's out and about and kind of follows her around. And yeah,
maybe it's my ace brain, but that doesn't sound very flattering.
No,
but they're kids, so I guess it's slightly different.
And he's a big chubby kid. I think I got confused because I couldn't quite clock how old he's supposed to be, because he's quite tall and big. Mm-hmm. So I thought, maybe he's supposed to be an adult with some sort of neural disability, because he's clearly supposed to be disabled. That's completely clear, because there's a scene of him and his adopted parents where the dad is complaining about him being weird and ranting.
Fun. The whole thing about wanting to be touched is very common. The whole thing of so a lot of people will misinterpret it, but the idea of the whole weighted blankets hugging machine, people having deep pressure because it helps you relax, it helps remove tension, and being touched by another person is good for you mentally. It's true for everyone.
Yeah,
it's just it's got to be on your terms.
Yeah.
So I can understand where they're coming from, but it feels like, in case you couldn't tell, this movie became a musical very last minute. They weren't originally supposed to be music videos.
Oh, they did. I assumed it was because it's supposed to be a vehicle for her music.
Nope, they decided that very last minute because Sia realised that the movie wasn't really working.
No, that explains it.
And she's like, well, I'm a musician, so if I put my music in it, then it will
work. But it doesn't. So in the morning, Kazoo oversleeps and fails to follow the morning routine, so Music comes into her bedroom and goes, make you eggs, shouting at her, make you eggs. And so she starts making the eggs and then tries to braid Music's hair and accidentally tugs on it, and Music start having a meltdown. She's flapping about, and Kazoo keeps trying to restrain her and hold her down. Not hold her down, but hold her, and she's getting flung against the wall. And then the neighbor shows up knocking on the door. So Kazoo goes up to open the door, and this neighbor, who is the character from earlier, who got a spotlight, who was giving a salute to the grandma's corpse, he walks in. His name is Ivo, and he is clearly knows music and clearly, quote unquote, knows what he's supposed to do in this situation, which apparently is immediately grab her, fling her over his shoulder, and then put her down on the floor and lay down on top of her and, quote unquote, crush her with his love. So what we have here is a so-called prone restraint, which is something that has been known to kill people.
Yeah, I was genuinely speechless because, prone restraints are a thing that are completely discouraged in most autistic communities and are only ever used when people are afraid of being hurt by autistic people. In a majority of situations where people feel like it's necessary, it's because they feel threatened.
Yeah.
Restraining is something people will try and avoid using, except in situations where the person is a harm to them, a danger to themselves or to others. And even then, you do not lie on top of someone, especially a child. It's happened in multiple school incidents where children have been suffocated by adults putting their full adult weight on top of their back. It's just not, it's not something you should show in film as a thing that you're supposed to do. I think it's irresponsible to show it in film, period.
Yeah.
If I was doing a hard-hitting, the way that people are mistreated in mental health institutions thing, I still would do a cutaway. Showing it is brutal, and I feel like this explains a lot about these. I don't believe that they were ever going to hire an autistic actor, but if this scene is this pivotal,
yeah, they fully show it. They fully show him on top of her, holding her down.
It's no wonder that no autistic person would have wanted to be on set. if it meant that Leslie Odom Jr.'s got to sit on top of them for a whole scene and, like, crush them into the ground.
Yeah.
Especially since it's a child. It's a child actor. Like, regardless of, like, the special needs thing, that is a child. Like, I can trust that I'm sure the actual actor in the scene didn't put his real actual weight on them, but still.
Yeah. It's a lot, and the way it's framed in this sort of twee, cutesy indie movie way, where crushing her with his love.
There's like 1,000 other things. People will use like weighted blankets. Usually, if you're encountering someone who is having a sensory overload, you just give them space. Like, try and help them get somewhere where they're not going to like hurt themselves.
Yeah, this is something that, because I talked to you about this. This was like kind of the rant I went on that made you say maybe we should talk about this if this is bothering you that much. I find it so perplexing how the moment people realize that they're dealing with an autistic person or just any neurodivergent people, suddenly normal social rules go out the window. If you saw someone who was clearly really upset, having some kind of meltdown, when would your first instinct be to huck them on the ground and get on top of them?
Mm-hmm.
When the fuck is that considered a normal thing to do? Apparently when they're autistic, apparently then suddenly the rules are flipped and you're supposed to immediately, like lightning, throw them down
just
and
rugby tackle
put
this
your
child.
Full weight on them. He doesn't rugby tackle her.
Yeah, but like grab them around their middle and like throw them on the floor is still pretty bad. Like it's a thing that like I've mentioned to you as a thing that I've just gotten used to, which is miserable. But like anytime I've been in a job or in a situation and I've been having like some kind of sensory overload, or I've asked like, oh, can I use headphones for this because it's too much distraction, or do you mind if I just like leave the room for a minute? The second I say it's because of my autism, not allowed. No. Are you sure? Do you want to stay here and talk about it? Let's make eye contact and discuss this in detail. Meanwhile, if I say, oh, it's because I have a migraine, it's like, oh yeah, just go take some painkillers and sit in a dark room.
Or if you just don't say anything, it's like the moment people find out that someone's autistic, suddenly all the rules don't apply anymore. This is such a fucking thing where I'm not autistic, as far as we know. I kind of have a little bit of issues with eye contact. Like, I don't have problems in most situations, but sometimes I wonder if I don't make eye contact enough. But no one has ever called me on that. No one has ever complained about it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like most people don't give a shit about eye contact until they find out that the reason someone isn't making eye contact is because they're autistic. And suddenly you have to make eye contact because otherwise you will never be able to emotionally connect to another person.
Every single piece of feedback I've ever had from an interview, the second I said, can I get feedback because I'm autistic and I'm not necessarily sure what I did wrong, it's always because, well, you didn't make enough eye contact and we didn't really click with you socially. So I'm sure before that it was something like, oh, you didn't mention X skill, but now it's because I mentioned I'm autistic, it's because of the things that I can do fuck all about, and also you shouldn't have,
expected of anyone.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's honestly... To anyone who isn't autistic, this does sound like very like, oh, but it's so much harder for us in a way you'll never understand. It genuinely is. It's not in a way that I think is as tangible as like, oh god, the things people do to people with physical disabilities is genuinely abhorrent.
Yeah, again, we talked about that. Like how is it fucking normal to randomly grab a blind person and try to lead them somewhere? You wouldn't do that to a seeing person. That would be fucking freaky. But suddenly, because they're blind, social rules don't apply anymore.
And that sounds made up. I've seen at least 3 separate Twitter chains of people who are sitting on a train or sitting on a bus with their cane, and then when the bus stopped, some random stranger grabbed their arm and tried to get them to move off the bus, and then got angry when they said, "Where are you taking me? I don't know you." Like, it happens. I've seen people in wheelchairs have their chair moved without their permission while they're sitting in a restaurant.
You wouldn't do that to a person sitting in a normal chair, but just because it's a wheelchair, because the person is disabled, social rules no longer apply. Why are people so fucking weird? The second they find out that someone is disabled, it's like this massive library of social skills and social rules that supposedly, quote-unquote, normal people have gets deactivated. Aren't they supposed to be the ones who are good at this shit?
Because it's like, anytime I see a guy, if you ever see someone with a service dog of any kind, don't interact with the dog. Don't talk to the person unless you would normally talk to them. Sometimes I get on the bus and there's people on the bus who will have a service dog, and I've seen them wearing like a cool pin, and I'll be like, nice pin. I don't be like, I'm gonna pet your dog. You wouldn't do that to a random person who just has their pet dog on the bus.
Yeah.
If you get on the bus and they say, can you not pet my dog, and it was just a pet, you'd be fine with it. But the second it's a service animal, you feel like you're owed that. leave them the fuck alone.
Well, like legitimately, why are people so fucking weird about disabilities?
Literally, I understand the impulse to want to help people who are disabled, because you feel like if you were in that situation, you would want the help. But they have lived in that situation their whole life, and if they want help, they have their own methods of getting help.
Let's be brutally honest. The real reason why people do that is because they want to feel good about themselves. If they see a disabled person, they're like, oh, I can earn some good people points. I can get a serotonin hit. And they don't really give a shit about the person involved.
Literally, if you want to help, go up, say, do you need a hand? If they say no, say, cool, have a nice day, and leave it alone.
Or wild concept. Maybe normal social rules apply, and if someone looks confused, lost, scared, sad, tired, then you can ask them if they need help. Maybe normal social rules apply to disabled people.
Look, if I go into a shop, I will offer anyone who's elderly, anyone who's looks like they might have trouble finding something in the shop, do you need a hand finding that? It would be the same for anybody else who looks lost. But if there's somebody in a fucking wheelchair and they seem to be getting around just fine, I don't need to go over and be like, I'll help you, because they haven't asked for that. Ever since I started wearing a sunflower lanyard in shops, the number of people who come up and try and take my basket out of my hands to do it for me.
You never told me about that.
It's just I didn't want to talk about it. It was a hard day.
Again. I don't it's I'm gonna say this. That fucking thing that happened to a person who has seizures, where someone tried to put keys in their mouth. Mm-hmm. That's fucked up. But I know why that happens. It's because that person has heard a stupid, wrong thing about what you're supposed to do when people have seizures. I understand people not knowing to do something that they're supposed to do when someone has a disability. I do not understand how your brain can go from this person is disabled, and that means that everything I know about to interact with another person does not apply. How the fuck does that work?
And I think movies like this don't help it, because they go to such an extent to be like, music needs people to do everything for her, but she can't possibly know, because she would never know that she needs help. This whole thing of they had this secret orchestrated thing of making sure she can get to her trip to the library and back on her own without telling her. People know if they need help. And if you were to, you should not go around assuming that everyone who's disabled just has a whole group of people secretly helping them and they couldn't possibly do it themselves, so you have to be another secret helper. The idea that they can't cope independently is dumb and outdated and completely not correct. Look, my number one piece of advice to all the, able-bodied neurotypicals, leave us the fuck alone. Just leave us the fuck alone.
If someone asks you for help, give them their help, but otherwise, just act fucking normal once in your life.
Don't be my manager who followed me into the bathroom where I'd gone to calm down from a sensory overload and try and talk to me and start turning the lights on and off to get my attention. Don't do that. If I go somewhere to be alone, leave me the fuck alone. This is a massive side tangent.
I know the word normal is, a lot of weight in it, but I feel like it applies in this. Just fucking act normal. You're supposed to be the normal one. Just act normal. God damn it. That's the one thing you're good at. Supposedly. Anyway, back to this movie. So, they go on Music's daily walk, and Ebo and Kazoo make eyes at each other because they're having a romance. Who the fuck gives a shit?
Not me, I'm Ace.
Ebo talks about his brother home in his village in... God, this is going to be so bad, but I think he might be from Ghana. He's kind of the classic wise African man thing, except he's also her romantic interest. But he talks about how he had a brother who was like Music, who liked to be held and hugged and felt safe. And the other villagers didn't understand, and he thought they were weird, and I forget if the brother gets killed or dies in an accident, but there's this weird bit where he kind of implies that it was for the best because his village was so backwards that he would never have had a good life.
How did this guy end up being racist as well as fucking ableist? I mean, also, I've seen this scene because the delivery of it is so abrupt, it's kind of hard not to fucking laugh.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, where's he now? He's dead now. It's so awful. It's so awful. The whole martyr, he's not a burden to anyone anymore. No one can hurt him in heaven. Let him fucking live on Earth first. Jesus.
Yeah. And also, Ebo is supposed to be the person who actually understands music a little bit better, and they're supposed to be friends. And he doesn't seem to find it off-putting that Kazoo is such a piece of shit, and talks about her sister like she's not a person, and saying that she's trying to get her taken to the people pound. And he's still like, oh, that's a bit weird, but you're still hot, so I guess we're doing this romance thing.
Jesus Christ. Why does no other person in this girl's life be like, hey, she's got no responsible adults around her?
Yeah, all these people who supposedly care so much about her are still perfectly fine with this clearly irresponsible, out-of-control drug dealer, shitty person.
Like, if she has a criminal record, it's very unlikely that any of this would have gone through.
And who never makes any secret of the fact that she doesn't give a shit about anything. Like, she's like, oh, my grandma is dead. But that doesn't matter. I never gave a shit. She will verbally say to people, oh, well, I'm not even going to pretend to act sad because I never gave a shit. Who's closer to grandma anyway? They come back to the apartment. Kazoo, again, tries interrupting Music's TV time to get some sort of connection with her. While she's looking for money, she found a box of old toys. And she talks about this, made-up friend she had as a kid who, quote-unquote, he has seizures too. And Music isn't really connecting. She just gets up and says, time for bed.
Mm-hmm.
And
again, it's the whole thing of, like, I understand wanting to connect with, like, a sibling who is, unable to communicate in conventional means and you want to have that connection. Just fucking do it on their terms, motherfucker. Stop interrupting their shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's the whole thing of, like, wow, I wonder why you're not connecting with her when she's clearly very based in the routine and in the middle of part of that routine where she clearly wants to do that part of the routine. Why can't you do that at the point where she used to talk to her grandma, which you already showed? Like, not talk to her, but, like, spend time with her? Like, fucking meet halfway.
Yeah.
Don't meet all the way. They shouldn't have to do anything.
So this, I forget if it's a music video or if it's, like, basically Ebo's plot. He has a phone call with someone about some money thing and he needs money for ... Next scene, he is making Music a little keyboard that she can use to say certain phrases.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm scared, yes, no.
Yeah, those exist.
Like,
it's just a communicative aid.
Communicative aid. And they go out into the street and fill up a paddle pool with water and they have a little pool party and it's supposed to be this sweet moment of, connection and this movie has no goodwill with me, so it doesn't work. Kazoo is trying to talk Music into taking a dip in the paddling pool, and she keeps pressing the no button, and Evo goes, well, she's a lady who knows what she wants. And then there's another music video that is something about, like, 2 + 2 = 1 or something like that. And they're dancing around a pool made of filled with styrofoam boxes, and they're all wearing outfits. And I guess this is supposed to be, Music's inner life about connecting with people. One problem with this movie, and again, this is something that I was pointed out in one of the essays I saw, that the music videos are supposed to be symbolic of Music's inner life. But the other characters also get music videos about their inner lives. Mm-hmm. So it's not like this kind of communication is particular to Music. Or this kind of metaphorical language about their inner life is particular to Music. So we don't really understand.
Which I think would be fine in a movie that I have better goodwill with if they did it as a everyone has an inner life thing.
Yeah.
But it feels like they just don't care about what Music's like, because it feels like all the songs you've brought up so far seem to reflect other people's opinions of the scenario more than hers.
Yeah.
Like, especially like the whole thing of 2 + 2 = 1. Like, the whole thing of, like, I don't understand why we're not connecting. Music does understand why they're not connecting, because Music doesn't want to connect right now. She can't.
Or no, she wants to, because, she loves her sister. It's
deep down, for some reason.
Yeah. Ebo is the boxing instructor at a local boxing club. I don't know what it's called. So they go hang out at his boxing thing, and then they go for a walk in the park.
It's this whole movie just random bits that go nowhere. It feels so scattershot.
That's also because I don't remember the things that don't interest me, which is a lot of... Basically, I'm not talking about Kazoo's drug dealing stuff. She has a quirky drug dealer character who is, her big mob boss who has his office of wigs, and he's a very quirky character who talks about his fashion choices, and it's supposed to be interesting, I think. Don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. And she's selling drugs to rich people who also have quirky characteristics, and who gives a shit. But anyway, so they go on a walk in a park, and Kazoo and Ebo have a conversation where Kazoo goes, see, maybe change is a good thing for her. New routine, a little boxing, a walk in the park. Ebo says, I'm not saying she doesn't want to change, I'm saying that she can't. Well, Kazoo says, well, that's one thing we both have in common.
I'm literally putting my head on the desk.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't done that since we watched the end of Sherlock. So the whole thing of like change is not just a thing that you can just do. Change is terrifying. Even change that is good, even change that you are prepared for, is scary. Yeah. And it's not the same kind of scary as changes for everyone. Like, it's completely, like, pit of your stomach terrifying. Like, I recently have gotten into D&D in a big, big way. And I'm trying to make the point of, like, I like D&D, but I only play it once a week with one group, so I would like to play it with another group on another day. The same game, the same thing I really like. Fucking terrifying. Hate it. Hate doing it. Just terrifying. But the thing is, like, that's how it is. Like, it's scary to have things be different. Like, I'm scared about the end of the pandemic stuff. I'm scared of things going back to normal because it's like my routine now is the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying, even though it is objectively better to not be in a lockdown where people are getting sick. But right now, my routine is go to work, can't go to the shops, go home. Like, that's scary. And people do not understand that. Just how fucking terrifying change is, because it's like so out of your control. It feels...
It's also this sort of thing where, like, I'm not saying that she doesn't want to change, because obviously she would want to change, because who would want to be like that? I'm saying that she can't.
I don't want to change. Like, seriously, it took a long time to get there, but a lot of that is, like, films like this that are very much perpetuating, you should want to be like everyone else. Like,
it's sort of like, of course they want to be normal, but the tragedy is that they can't.
I'm going to point out that music seems pretty happy with the shit she actually gets to do when they're on top of it. When they're on top of her shit, she doesn't seem upset.
Yeah, she's, like, this scene happens as music is walking ahead of them, like, seem happy, like, clearly having the time of her life, kind of. She's happy in the sunshine, she's got her headphones, she seems fine.
I'm sure it's the flappy hands, happy hands thing.
She's not doing the flappy hands, she's sort of, like, random.
Oh, is stimming only supposed to be when it's upsetting?
No, she's, like, kind of, like, jerking around a bit awkwardly sometimes, but it's mostly when she's upset.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Ebo, it feels like a fucking PSA, Ebo delivering this speech of, she can understand everything you are saying to her. Maybe not right then. How it works is, she hears it, and she files it away because she's like a computer. It's returned to her main system 3 weeks later.
How did we run into the fucking autistic people are robots metaphor this week? How? Like, I haven't gone into it in detail, and I'm sure we will when we eventually get to our boy Data. Our boy! It's such a problem, because it's like, it so heavily implies they aren't human.
Yeah.
But not only that, they're not organic. They're not like any other creature on Earth. They are entirely without feelings.
Yeah.
Which is not fucking true. Clearly, she has a lot of feelings. And lack of emotional regulation is a genuine problem in a lot of autistic people. And it's always made worse by shit like this, with people assuming they don't have feelings.
Yeah. And also, this is the problem, this speech saying that, you know, oh, she does understand everything you're saying to her. And there's a bit where she's like, you know, she's... Oh, this is so fucking cringe, where they try to talk about, you know, that thing, like, she can't look at people for too long. She, like, when she glances at you, that's her taking a snapshot and filing it away in her mind. And there's like, it's sort of like, and it's a bit where they're basically cutting to, you know, music's perspective, where, you know, it's dark and they're highlighted, and it's like in slow motion, her glancing at her sister, and her face is lit up in, you know, a sort of heavenly Gloria, her face in like a snapshot. And it's...
Motherfucker, I can tell you right now what it's like to be someone who does not look at faces. You just don't know what faces look like. I'm sorry, you don't. I don't know what anybody looks like. I know people by their hair, I know people by the colour of their skin, and I know people by having glasses. And that's kind of it. I know what Tilda's face looks like, but that's from, like, long-term exposure. Like being at Chernobyl.
It's not so much... Yeah. How fucking dare you? First of all.
But, like, seriously, I don't even know what my own fucking face really looks like, because I don't take photos and I don't look at my own features very much. But I know what people look like in a very vague, general sense.
I'm sorry, I'm not over that fucking ruthless drive-by. Tilda, my best friend in the world, your face is like a nuclear disaster.
You know I didn't mean it that way. I'm having
enough to deal with as it is. I watched this movie for you. How dare you?
You know I love you. This is not meant in a mean way. But it's true for, like, anybody I spend a lot of time around. Like, I was going to go with, like, long-time exposure photograph to keep us with the photograph metaphor. I mean, yeah, but I went with long-term exposure and I couldn't think of photographs, so I went with nuclear disaster. I've been watching disaster videos on YouTube, in case you couldn't tell. Watch Fascinating Horror. It's a good YouTube channel. Irrelevant to this, but good YouTube channel.
We gotta speed through because we've been going for a long while and we're not even halfway through. Music is doing fine, and then some children run past being noisy, and she has a meltdown because she gets overwhelmed. There's this sort of thing where we're cutting to inside her head, and metaphorical language. It's Ebo dancing around on the ground, and where he dances, the sand glows, and a bunch of stuff like that. But anyway, she has a sensory overload, and Ebo is like to Kazoo, "Oh, you gotta restrain her down now because, me, a black man, can't be restraining a little white girl in the park." And so Kazoo gets on top of Music, holds her down, and she goes, "Ow, she's hitting me." And Ebo goes, "Talk to her, you gotta let her know who she's hitting."
We've kind of already gone into that bullshit.
And there's a bit where, so she calms down, and then it seems to be immediately fine. Like, she's back to being smiling and laughing, and they have snow cones, and she's perfectly fine, like minutes after having a really brutal meltdown and
even ignoring being sat on. If you have a meltdown, it sucks. Tilda's been there for me after I've had a meltdown before. Your whole body fucking aches.
Yeah,
everything feels like too much. Lights are too much.
Emotionally draining and physically draining.
It's like anytime you've had a really big long cry, how you feel kind of sick and tired.
Yeah,
it's that. But
and again, it's
all over.
This is the thing that confuses me, because to me, as a person who does not have these kind of meltdowns, I don't think I'll ever be able to understand what it is like, but I feel like I can understand the principle of the thing. Someone has had a very emotionally straining experience, and that makes them physically tired. I feel like that's so easy to understand intuitively that it confuses me that apparently people don't understand it.
It's not easy.
More shit about Kazoo's romance with Ebo. She has a music video. She wants to be in a relationship with him, but she's insecure, and humans can be so insecure, and it's cutting to different characters and insecurities and blah 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 blah. More romance stuff. Ebo is playing the piano and Kazoo is singing, and it's a song about music, the concept of music, but isn't it really about music with a capital M music? And meanwhile, so it's them in the foreground and playing the piano and singing, and then music is into the background, the literal background of the shot, like she's out of focus, sitting at the table, rocking back and forth. And I think it's supposed to be, she's actually listening to the music, and this is actually them having a connection. But it also feels like it's supposed to be more about Kazoo and her romantic connection with Ebo.
I mean, if there was ever a fucking metaphor for this movie,
but they're
singing a song about music while music is barely on screen and they're actually focusing on each other, is pretty much it.
Ebo has a song about his eternal life. I think he sits down in a coffin at one point because, spoilers, he has HIV, I think. It's, again, some scenes in this movie are confusing. And then Kazoo basically can't force one of the neighbors to babysit music, because apparently as much as this entire neighborhood are in love with music, they don't have the time to babysit her while her sister goes out on her drug deals. So she has to bring music with her to sell drugs to this big new hot client who wants a big whole bunch of drugs. And they go to this studio where, there's a bunch of outfits and makeup, and there's this wig there, and Kazoo goes, "Wait, is that a Sia wig? Is Sia here?" And the sort of PA is like, "Wait, I can't disclose that, it's secret." And then this person goes "Oh, is that the drug dealer? Bring her over here." And I think it's Sia. I can't tell because her face is covered in makeup. And it's not as bad as it could be. It's not like everyone is "Oh my god, it's the glorious Sia," but it's a little bit like that. And Sia is buying this confused me because I wasn't really paying attention, and also because it doesn't make any fucking sense. Sia is buying drugs so they can sell them, or they can donate them to this people in South America who've been in a big natural disaster, because buying illegal drugs is quicker than getting them through legal means. It's just he's doing a charity thing.
They needed a reason for the shitty sister to connect to Sia, but they couldn't make Sia look like a bad person who did drugs, even though Sia is a fucking pop star.
Yeah, and maybe that's supposed to be uncovered. I don't know. It's really brief. There's another music video about Music's inner life, which basically just tells her that she likes dress up, I think. It's about her like coming in and out of like a dressing room.
I'm sure it's the whole
crazy outfits.
I'm sure it's supposed to be a whole thing about masking, but they haven't fucking done that at all.
I don't think they fucking know what masking is. Are you kidding me? There's another scene where Kazoo has another job where she's supposed to deliver HIV drugs to someone, and I think it's supposed to be Eva, but we never see them in shot together. So the first time I watched it, I was confused if that was what we're supposed to be indicating. So Eva has HIV, and then another fucking scene with the cool quirky drug dealer, and Kazoo manages to convince him to give her this massive amount of drugs so she can, deliver them, and it's her big final job, and then she'll be debt-free and,
on her way.
On her way. But as she's walking through as she's walking through the park with Music crawls under a park bench to eat chewing gum off it, which just feels really random. And
like, Pike has not come up before this point. She's not got a thing of like chewing her hair or
no.
Because Pike is like a fairly frequent... if you don't know what piker is, it's eating non-food items. Yeah. So like, it's a very common thing for people to chew hair or like chew on cushions, chew on blankets. Stuff that feels nice in your mouth. Yeah. If you feel like it feels nice, you'll probably eat it.
She just grabs a random piece of chewing gum from under a bench.
Which is bad texture time
anyway. It feels
like
it's supposed to just be gross. And again, with that whole thing where like Music supposedly completely understands the world around her just differently, but she doesn't understand. Like, it's
and it's also not like she's trying to replace part of her routine.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
A thing I've seen where it's like those horrible stories you hear about parents who like try and force their kids to eat stuff they don't want to eat when they have like texture issues, and they'll just eat the thing they want to eat, but not cooked or straight out the trash or whatever.
Yeah,
like because it's their routine. They eat that now. Eating random chewing gum, I think they could have it would have been a stretch then even if it was like a thing that she always has like a sweet at this time of the day, but no.
But she knows to crawl under a park bench and find old chewing gum there. And so Kazoo is, kind of talking to her like she's a dog. Spit it out. And then Music gets stung by a bee and has another freak out. And Kazoo freaks out too because she doesn't know if Music is like allergic to bees or not. Mm-hmm. And, she's screaming and freaking out, not being very helpful at all, and brings her to the ER and gets her checked out. And because of this, they miss Ebo's boxing match thing, or boxing tournament for all his students, which was important for some reason. Mm-hmm. And in the hospital, Kazoo realizes that, oh no, because she was, busy freaking out, kind of blowing things out of proportions in my mind, she forgot her big bag full of, drugs. Like the biggest amount of drugs you can ever have in one go.
Biggest piece of advice for meltdowns: try and keep low energy.
Why would you also be freaking out?
Don't escalate the energy. It's true for anyone. If you're in an argument, you don't argue back.
Also, similarly, if someone who's allergic might have been stung by a bee, again, don't freak out. What is that going to do? Raise their blood pressure, make them, sicker.
Have a reaction faster. The thing is, if you're dealing with someone who you don't know if they're allergic and they don't know what's happening and they're scared. In the case of Music's character, I assume that she doesn't really understand what happened or what made her
not clear
her
because, she's not
why would it matter what her perspective is?
Yeah.
But, the thing you have to do is it's probably no big deal. You fucking lie. You
lie through your teeth.
You do it for kids. You do the magic water trick, which is it's okay, I've got some magic water that'll make it all better, and you just put it on the spot where it's stung. And if it turns out to be serious, you try and teach them, okay, we're going to go talk to someone who knows how to deal with this. Yeah. Even if you're freaking out, you stay calm.
What I'm saying is, I think it's not unrealistic that a person who doesn't know how to deal with shit would freak out in the situation. My problem is that it feels like this is Kazoo's fault that this happened. She was acting like a fucking idiot. She forgot the drugs. She had a fucking complete freak out over a kind of minor thing. But it feels like it's kind of, Music being difficult.
Yeah, it feels like
when Kazoo did just everything she possibly could to make the situation worse.
It feels like a contrivance of the plot based on the fact that she
you would think that if losing the drugs mattered.
It doesn't matter?
No! So basically, they get back to the apartment. Well, it kind of matters, but not for the reasons you think. And obviously, Kazoo's freaking out because her drug dealer buddy told her, basically, if you're fucking me, you're gonna die. and she's freaking out. She went back to the park, the drugs were gone, and she's having like a complete freak out, and she's drinking, and Music is pressing the button saying, I'm scared, and Kazoo replies, we're all scared. You know, being really helpful in this is being like a really good, helpful carer.
I mean, I won't go into a whole other tangent, because I will, and you've already heard my tangent about the way people treat disabled people in public. Like, this is screaming of, like, those autism stories that aren't autism narratives. Like, autism stories are about experiences around autism.
Yeah.
Like, how hard it is to be around autism. Autism narratives are about existing with autism.
Yeah.
About being autistic, or about experiencing autism in your day-to-day life, as opposed to having to be around it and how hard that is for you.
How hard it is when you, having a complete freak out over a minor thing, loses you a big bag of drugs.
Like, that's on you, motherfucker.
But anyway, so she made a big show out of pouring a bunch of alcohol down the drain, but she managed earlier in the, thing. But she manages to find some more and gets shit-faced, and is like out in the hallway, feeling sorry for herself. Ebo comes by and is like, hey, shouldn't you be like in there watching over your, sister?
Your vulnerable ward?
And she's like, oh, she's asleep, she'll be fine. Anyway, do you want to make out? And he's like, no. Because he's like,
you're a shitty human being, and I've only just realised now, apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
Or is it just I don't want to take advantage of you because you're drunk?
Or he's sad that they missed his boxing thing. I don't remember.
Over it, man.
I don't remember, but she's whining, and there's a big bit where I wrote it down because it's so. She's sobbing. Because he talks about music and like, is music okay? And she basically goes, why don't you care about me? And then she roams the town drunk, and there's another music video about, I forget, because it doesn't really matter.
It's become extremely evident how music is tertiary at best to the actual plot they want to tell at this point. So
another thing happens in this sort of like, while Kazoo is roaming through the town drunk and having an experience, there's a bit where she has a heart backpack, and it's like, oh, she's wearing her heart on her sleeve but on her back, whatever. That boy I mentioned earlier, who may or may not have a crush on music, it's unclear, and who has shitty parents. Also, I think he is either Latino or...
He's not white.
He's not white. He's also not Asian, but he has Chinese adoptive parents, I think. Mm-hmm. Or East Asian adoptive parents. And the dad is like really shitty and yelling at him for not being a real man and for not being good at boxing. He's one of Ebo's students as well in the boxing. And he's mad now because his son didn't do well in the boxing thing from earlier. And he's screaming at his wife, and we see this boy, he's like at the computer looking at pictures of dogs, which I guess is supposed to be related to music because she likes dogs. You can see him make a decision, and he goes out into the kitchen where the dad is beating up on the mom, and he, gets in between. And long story short, the dad somehow manages to throw him on the ground hard enough that his head splits open, and he's dead.
They just throw a domestic abuse storyline in as like a, flavor piece.
By the way, and then this guy's dead, and there's another music video, which, again, I was confused that this character was supposed to be dead, because he appears in one of the music videos at the end of the movie, but I think he is supposed to be dead. And he's one of Ebo's students, and Ebo never mentions it, as far as I remember, that this child is dead.
Was murdered by a parent?
Yeah.
You'd think that would be the talk of the town, really.
Yeah, no, but we got more important things to care about. And so there's a scene where it's a repeat of the song that Kazoo and Ebo were singing at the piano, including such zingers as, music is a soothing saint. Use me to feel your pain. From the bottom of my heart to your poor soul. Stuff like that.
My head's on the table again.
Do you get it? Because music doesn't have real normal feelings, but she can use her beautiful sister to feel her emotions for her. And she's such a martyr.
I'm genuinely fucking out of words. Jesus Christ.
We're getting towards the end. Basically, after her sort of running through the town, freaking out, Kazoo is fine now, I guess. She sobs about how she's a bad person, and then everything is magically okay. Everyone forgives Kazoo, and she starts getting her shit together, getting proper jobs. The drug dealer is apparently okay with her losing all those drugs. Like, they don't really bring it up in any way. You'd think that would be important, her losing a fucking massive amount of drugs, but nope, fuck you.
You think that a child being murdered by their parent in the background would also be important, but I guess not.
No, doesn't really matter. And so Kazoo basically gets her life together in montage. You think it would be more important, but it isn't.
You think that would have been the actual plot of the movie?
No, fuck you. Music gets taken to a facility because, so as much as Kazoo has got her shit together now, it's probably for the best of her to be in a facility. But they have a moment together where they're, sitting at the bed together, and now suddenly Music is able to speak to the point where she can ask Kazoo not to leave her. When all she's been able to do until now is, again, it's fucked up that she verbally says don't go when she could probably use her, speech aid to do that.
Yeah.
They have her verbally say it because that's supposed to be more meaningful, I guess.
Yeah.
And suddenly Kazoo, who this entire movie has shown is in no way fucking qualified to take care of her sister, decides that, fuck it, we're going to that wedding that Ebo invited us to earlier, that I forgot to mention because who the fuck gives a shit, of his brother getting married to Ebo's ex-wife. Mess. So they run out of the facility and they go to the wedding, and Kazoo gives a big speech to Ebo, which is like, I almost gave away Music today, but I'm gonna stay and I'm gonna help her, just like she helped me, because I love her. And I think that's what you do when you love someone.
Motherfucker, do you know how hard it is to get someone into a fucking facility? Like,
in America.
In America, but also just in general. You can't just be like, go through that whole process, which is a months-long process, and be like, actually, no, I changed my mind on the first day. Because I've already agreed to admit them. It's too fucking late for you to do shit. Like, you'll have to go through all that rigmarole to get them out again. And also, you don't meet the qualifications. I'm sorry, but love is not a substitute for having professional training in therapy.
So, I'm sorry, I need to finish this. So, quite literally, Ebo and Kazoo kiss, and everybody clapped on the stage. And then they sing a song, and Music is able to sing in a frail, stuttery voice, but she's able to sing the song about music. And ooh-woo.
I wish I drank.
And then the three of them are having a wonderful life together, and they get a dog, and there's a music video where the dead kid's alive again, and a bunch of other... It's this sort of thing, like, a collage of, like, other little children of, different ethnicities. And wearing different colors and rainbows. And then the movie ends.
I wish I drank.
Do you want a sip of my weird chocolate rum concoction?
No, thank you for not making me watch this movie with you for this podcast. I appreciate you, taking this bullet for me.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't think I'm baffled by the content. It's just, if you know anything about, the culture around autism representation of this kind, you would know these kind of films have kind of gone out of vogue in a big way.
Yeah, that was one of the points that I couldn't let go, is that from my understanding, this movie was in developmental hell for a long while.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows, because it feels like this movie is from a different era. It's not from the same era where one of the big it things on Netflix for a while was a show that was a dating show about autistic people.
Mm-hmm.
That was, from the perspective of autistic people, about what they want in a relationship, wanting to be in a relationship and going on dates. Adults.
Yeah, and it's a reality show. It's not a fiction.
We don't really... These movies aren't in vogue anymore, it feels.
They aren't in vogue, but a lot of it is because, there was a big, I say in quotes, autism diagnosis boom. Which just basically means diagnosis got more accessible and better in the early 2000s, and there was the big scare about MMR, so a lot of more people were like, what if my child has autism from MMR vaccine? I'll get them tested for autism. Oh no, more people have autism. It's like, you just tested more people for autism. They probably already had it. By probably, I mean definitely. It's a thing of, there was a big autism boom, and there was a big, parent scare in the early 2000s. It's 20 years later.
I am autism. I'm going to piss on your couch and kill your dog. Whack, whack, whack,
Yeah, the Ferengi autism spectre, as we like to call it. But, like, it's 20 years later now. All the kids who were, like, the special needs children at that time are now in their 20s. I'm in my 20s. My brother's in his 20s.
I'm in my 20s.
Nice to meet you. We're shaking hands. Literally, it's the thing of they are now able to advocate for themselves in a way they weren't able to 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If not only because of the whole thing of adults now, but also, like, the internet has such a stronger basis for people being able to advocate for themselves in a way that can't just be ignored. And organize. Like, if you look up actually autistic, the hashtag on almost any platform, you will find a lot of people who are talking about their own genuine experiences with autism in a way that is so much more accessible and relatable than all these kind of films that try and make a thing out of the drama of dealing with a difficult disability. Like, I'm on TikTok now. I'm at Spectrum Projection if you want to check me out. But, like, I mostly make stuff about being autistic and playing D&D, just so you get my entire brand. Yeah. But my point is, like,
I make TikToks about the fact that Data got a dick before he got the sense to cover it up. So that's my brand.
But my point is, like, this alienation just doesn't exist anymore. Like, not in the same way, not at all. Like, stories of people being harmed by these restraints get far more attention now than they did 10, 15 years ago. People know that stuff is not okay.
And frankly, it's so much easier to call this kind of movie out. I've seen a lot of discourse around this movie, because obviously that's why I wanted to talk about it. And a lot of the defenses people make of this movie are fucking pathetic. Like, one of the common one is, oh, you weren't this upset about Rain Man, and, you know, this fucking 17-year-old TikToker is like, I literally wasn't born then, but yeah, I don't like Rain Man either. Idiot!
Like, it's a whole thing of, like, people don't seem to understand the speed and the, like, depth of change that happens in autistic communities. Like, literally 15 years, autism and how it's thought about now is so different to how it was thought about 15 years ago, that, like, when they first talked about them hiring someone who wasn't autistic for this role, I literally had to think, like, why have I never heard of this discourse before? Why is this the first time I've heard about it? It's like, because we're only now getting to the point where having characters actually called autistic is a fairly common occurrence.
Yeah, before, like, then they were just quirky and weird.
Like, this whole podcast is based on us being like, this person fits that stereotype or that character archetype. But they don't call it that because it's only recently that people like, it would make more sense for us to just call a chicken, or call a duck. You know, it's not, there's never been a, like, outcry for people who are autistic to play autistic characters, because there haven't been autistic characters. Like, everyone says how they should have had Sheldon played by an autistic actor, but they never would have admitted to the character being autistic. They never would have put that word on it because it was considered too controversial and too upsetting. And that's how much things have changed. Mm-hmm. And this film still seems to want to treat autism as like this scary demon that's going to ruin your life and can be so inspiring if you just get to know it. And it's like, we're so moved beyond this point.
And isn't it a mystery? It's the sort of thing where...
And also, like, it doesn't make any attempt to, like, engage with what this person actually wants or needs. Like, all these, like,
a mystery.
All of these meltdowns and stuff, like, a lot of schools now, like, will have put in stuff like sensory rooms or, like, fidget toys or a billion other, like, things that are small that people do to help calm people down before they get to meltdown stage.
Yeah.
Like, I have a weighted blanket. I have fidget toys. I have all this stuff. And it does help in such a way where I don't have meltdowns nearly as frequently as I did as a child, because I have way better structure and tools in place for me now.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, fuck it. Who cares what she needs?
And it's... I pointed this out. Like, of course, this kind of movie, it's the main character is not the person with autism or the autistic person. It's the caregiver, because the person who's making the movie cannot write autistic characters. Music is not a character, because she is... to Sia, to the people working on this movie, incomprehensible. Mm-hmm. She does not really have an inner life. And the inner life she has to be steeped in and obfuscated in metaphor. Because you can't just deliver it in easy to understand language or easy to understand visual language, because you don't understand it. Mm-hmm. The person who makes it doesn't understand autistic people well enough to deliver their perspective, so you can't make them the main character because you cannot write from their perspective.
And I think there is an inherent thing of, like, as much as they say they want to understand autistic people, there is still a part of them that truly does not conceptually think of them as people.
Yeah. They want to understand them in the same way you want to understand an animal. Mm-hmm. You don't want to understand what an animal thinks. You want to understand how an animal acts and why it acts that way. Mm-hmm. So you can predict its behavior and control its behavior.
Mm-hmm. This is where the whole behavior therapy stuff comes into it.
We are not going to go into it,
but basically the whole behavior therapy thing focuses on like correcting behavior that people think is bad, as opposed to addressing the problems that cause people to engage in the behavior that they don't like stimming, like whatever. And like this whole thing is so about like, well, I just don't want to deal with the outcome of that, to the point where like there is nothing that causes it. Like there's nothing that causes any of the stuff that happens to music. It's just sometimes she randomly flips out and there's nothing that can be done.
Because she hears a loud noise or she gets her hair pulled. So there are quote unquote reasons why, but it's just the solutions they present are extreme and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that we think this is a bad movie. Like bad autism rep.
Bad movie. Like I went into this movie I knew it was going to be bad in terms of the autism stuff, but I tried to be fair, to be like, okay, maybe from a practical point of view, maybe it's a well-made movie, maybe the music is good, and I did not get much enjoyment out of it in terms of, like, I didn't really like the music. I find it painfully twee. The visuals I found very dated, like early 2000s indie darling movie type things, Little Miss Sunshine, except not a good movie. Mm-hmm. It's
very clearly a debut, because this is Sia's first film, and hopefully, dear fucking god, her last. But like, yeah. I feel like I'm being overly mean, but fuck it, she deserves it. Like,
because she's not listened to anyone, and all her apologies have been really hollow, and she's been really fucking shitty to people on Twitter. So I'm not going to be kind to her.
She's been very self-serving.
This movie feels like this was made to make Sia look good, and that's something that I've heard from other people as well. Like saying she wanted to make a movie that would make her look intelligent and compassionate, and like, you know, of the layman, not of the layman, but, you know, charitable and knowledgeable. And she just kind of randomly decided to pick autism as her issue. And
because she had a family friend who had a child who was autistic. Literally, yeah. It's like, it could have been almost anything.
Like, she saw this child, stacking blocks in order and being like...
They just talked to the child's parent. They definitely didn't interact with the child itself.
Not. Yeah, so it again, it's the same thing we're talking about, like, where people will, quote-unquote, try to help disabled people. But it's entirely self-serving in that they're doing it to make themselves feel like a good, intelligent, you know, respectable people.
Without ever engaging with the idea of, like, whether they're helping or what kind of help would be warranted. Like, how would a movie promoting awareness of autism help anyone in the year 2021, where autism has multiple extremely well-known charities and there's literally dozens and dozens and dozens of campaigns talking about autism all the time? I think awareness is a dumb thing to boast any kind of, like, any kind of political atrocity style charity
and
around.
Also the fact that this movie that's supposed to be, it feels like it's supposed to be very deep, and at the end of the day, the message is, hey, inside autistic people's heads, they are people. It's a human being, woo. Like, wow, Sia, you managed to figure out that autistic people are people? You're so smart and wise and genius.
Someone called Temple Grandin because they ripped off Sia's idea by being an autistic person who wrote an autobiography fucking 30 years ago. Like,
Sia, we're all fucking pissing our pants and trembling in the presence of your massive intellect. Did you know that non-verbal people aren't just objects? There was an interview where this interviewer is just fucking marveling on, like, you know, you might think that with non-verbal people that's basically just a wig that isn't even a person. But your movie manages to show that inside that person is a
human being.
And Sia is like, yeah, I did do that.
Fuckers. Like, honestly, it's the thing of, like, maybe I'm just, like, too personally entrenched in, like, the whole autism world But it just seems baffling to me that people would need reminding at this point.
Yeah. You'd think. But people will randomly grab blind strangers in the street and try to take them somewhere. So maybe normal people are fucking stupid and
maybe they're the ones that need therapy?
Yeah. You know what? Fuck it, yeah.
Everyone get therapy, I mean it.
Especially normal people. Because the thing about normal people is that they've never done any introspective at all. They don't think about why they do the shit they do, and that makes them fucking dangerous.
That's a way to end the podcast, I think.
You know what? I'm tired. This episode is now over. Unless you have anything else to say.
I mean, I do need to do our outro. And I will say, next week we will do something that we actually want to talk about.
Yeah, you know what? Data.
Fine, we'll do data.
I'm so fucking tired of this bullshit. I hate it here.
Prepare for a fucking 2.5 hour podcast where we talk about data the entire time. It probably won't be 2.5 hours, but maybe in the original cut it will be.
Anyway,
this was Spectrum Projection with your hosts Tanner and Tilda. Our theme music is Summer Longing by Tilda. Send us suggestions for future topics to spectrumprojection@gmail.com or to our Twitter and Facebook pages at SpecProjPodcast. Thanks.
Bye.